Well, welcome to this episode of Parish and Pub. I'm Stephen Brannon. It's a rainy, gray day here in Atlanta. Good day to stay inside and read. And speaking of reading, I just finished Brideshead Revisited, as it's been touted as one of the best novels of the 20th century by several thinkers and writers that I like to follow and keep up with. And after finishing it, I went searching for a little commentary to help me contextualize it a little bit and figure out what I think about it by reading what others think about it. It's a handy thing to do after you read a book. And I found some helpful thoughts by the author Joseph Pearce, and namely drawing out one specific facet or theme, which was the acceleration of modernity after World War I and the loss of essentially tradition, in a word. And one of the most clear and obvious ways that the novel does this is through two particular characters, a young platoon commander named Hooper and the suitor and later husband of one of the main characters, Julia, named Rex Mottram. Both of these men are painted as typical of the emerging age, i.e. modern. And what we discover that means, what the loss of the taproot in human tradition means, is the hollowing out of their own humanity. This is how the main character and narrator, Charles, now approaching middle age at the height of World War II, describes Hooper, the younger soldier under his command. Hooper was no romantic. He had wept often, but never for Henry's speech on St. Crispin's Day, nor for the epitaph at Thermopylae. The history they taught him had had few battles in it, but instead a profusion of detail about humane legislation and recent industrial change. And he goes on to list famous battles that he had learned about, and says, "These, and the battle in the west where Arthur fell, and 100 such names, whose trumpet notes, even now, in my sere and lawless state, called to me irresistibly across the intervening years with all the clarity and strength of boyhood, sounded in vain to Hooper." And the other ultra-modern character, Rex, is trying at one point to quickly get over the hurdle of becoming Roman Catholic in order to marry Julia. And he leaves the priest attempting his catechism utterly flummoxed. The priest says, "I can't get anywhere near him. He doesn't seem to have the least intellectual curiosity or natural piety. Lady Marchmain, he doesn't correspond to any degree of paganism known to the missionaries." The priest later attributes this bizarre hollowness to his education. The trouble with modern education is you never know how ignorant people are. With anyone over 50, you can be fairly confident what's been taught and what's been left out. But these young people have such an intelligent, knowledgeable surface, and then the crust suddenly breaks and you look down into depths of confusion you didn't know existed. And not to spoil too much of the novel if you haven't read it, but Rex does marry Julia, and they eventually divorce. Julia, reflecting back, says of him, "You know, Father Mowbray hit on the truth about Rex at once, that it took me a year of marriage to see. He simply wasn't all there. He wasn't a complete human being at all. He was a tiny bit of one, unnaturally developed. Something in a bottle, an organ kept alive in a laboratory. I thought he was some sort of primitive savage, but he was something absolutely modern and up to date that only this ghastly age could produce. A tiny bit of a man pretending he was a whole." Now, what's amazing about these descriptions, these characters, is how consonant they are, how much they agree with the men without chests in C.S. Lewis's fantastic book, The Abolition of Man, and also more obliquely with the hollow men of T.S. Eliot's poem, though I wouldn't have made that connection without the really great intertextuality knowledge about that novel that Joseph Pearce brings out in his article that I found. I'm much more familiar with Lewis and The Abolition of Man, as you can see from my Wisdom of C.S. Lewis mug, and his coffee. Much more familiar with Lewis and his book, The Abolition of Man. And I've been saying for years that it's my favorite of his books, and that everyone, absolutely everyone, especially our teachers and politicians, should read it. The main idea about the modern phenomenon of men without chests in Lewis's book is that they still have stomachs, representing the animal appetite portion of man, and heads, representing the bare intelligence, the instrument of just reason, naked reason, but no longer any chests, what he calls the seat of moral intuition, of noble sentiments, of trained emotions. The reason is supposed to rule the animal appetites, i.e. the stomach, in us, but can only do so through the heart, the spirited element, as Lewis calls it. He says, without the aid of trained emotions, the intellect is powerless against the animal organism. The head rules the belly through the chest, the seat, as Alanus tells us, of magnanimity, of emotions organized by trained habit into stable sentiments. The chest, magnanimity, sentiment, these are the indispensable liaison officers between cerebral man and visceral man. It may even be said that it is by this middle element that man is man, for by his intellect he is mere spirit, and by his appetite, mere animal. Lewis, in that essay, actually agrees with the priest from Brideshead Revisited that modern education is largely to blame, or at least is participating in this project of modernity in devastating and very critical ways. In one of his own novels, That Hideous Strength, Lewis describes one of the characters, Mark Studdock, like this. In Mark's mind, hardly one rag of noble thought, either Christian or pagan, had a secure lodging. His education had been neither scientific nor classical, merely modern. The severities both of abstraction and of high human tradition had passed him by. He had neither peasant shrewdness nor aristocratic honor to help him. Hollow men, men without chests, modern men. Why am I bringing this up on this channel, and what does it have to do with the parish and the pub? Well, just as we saw in my last video, that the breakdown of attendance in the parish and pub leads to isolation, which leads to unhappiness. Here, the breakdown of participation in the human tradition at the parish and pub leads to a loss of moral intuition and noble sentiments, which then leads to the loss of perception of meaning, which in turn leads to a loss in happiness. I don't mean to put it quite so trite, as if happiness in the bland sense of just having all you want is the point of life, but I do mean that there are benchmarks of psychological, social, and spiritual health that we can all basically agree are good for us, and that both isolation and the loss of connection to the broad history of the human search for meaning are objectively bad for us. To be very on the nose about it, since I'm trying to establish this strong foundation here at the beginning of the channel, in the parish we meet and participate in the transcendent, not just accidentally like we may experience it out alone in nature or listening to a beautiful piece of music, but regularly, intentionally, and communally. This does something to us. It trains that liaison office of the chest, making it a strong mediator between head and stomach, especially if your church's tradition has periods of fasting and feasting, which it ought to, where you practice making your mind govern your stomach in a very intentional way. And in the pub, you get to talk through these human traditions, encounter them through the eyes and experiences of others, and so enrich and fortify your own experience of them. You get to, open your mind and heart, chest, and stomach, actually, in the pub, to all the good things around you, instead of, spending your time just working for work's sake or spending disproportionately an inordinate amount of time on entertainment that's, less than elevating. So, in his article, Joseph Pierce says, although the hollow men are lost, and there are none so lost as those who do not know that they are lost, there is no reason for future generations to follow them into the wilderness of the wasteland. Another T.S. Eliot reference. So, don't be a Hooper or a Rex Mottram or a Mark Studdock. Don't be a hollow man. Full hearts and strong chests come from participation in the parish and pub, where the deep roots of human tradition live and perpetuate. I hope to see you there. Till next time.